Hat, sunglasses, Pepsi, notes, sources, thick skin, check. You already know. Let's go. Golden Blued is a college football YouTube channel for entertainment. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and let's get into our next college football video. Notre Dame has a lot of power in college football. Not just brand recognition and all the history and pageantry that goes with Notre Dame, but they have a lot of power as far as conference realignment goes. They can literally, with the snap of their fingers, cause several conferences to dissolve or immediately save some conferences. So let's take a look at just how much power Notre Dame does have as far as what they would decide and the consequences on each decision. So the first decision is Notre Dame decides to join the Pac-12. No, this is never going to happen, but I have to include the Pac-12. If this actually did happen, I think the Pac-12 would be able to steal teams from the Big 12 because Notre Dame would help that TV contract tremendously, and the Pac-12 would make way more money than the Big 12, and it would attract those teams from the Big 12. I think they could get teams like Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Iowa State, and yes, maybe even BYU if the Pac-12 ever gets over themselves and stops hating religion so much. But this is what I was talking about. Notre Dame, if they decided to join the Pac-12, they would immediately save the Pac-12, and the Pac-12 would become a destination instead of a dying conference. The next decision would be, what if Notre Dame does indeed join the Big Ten? This is a real possibility. And I know, the Michigan factor is what's been keeping Notre Dame out of the Big Ten. But if Notre Dame can swallow that grudge that they have against Michigan and join the Big Ten, it would actually be a really good decision. A lot of their rivalries are already in the Big Ten. Of course, the Big Ten makes a truckload of money, and the Big Ten is now coast to coast. So Notre Dame doesn't have to worry about being a regional team. See, that's the thing with Notre Dame. They don't want to be regional. They want to play everybody across the entire nation. I understand that, but joining a conference wouldn't limit you as far as that goes. But joining the Big Ten would mean that you're joining a conference that's coast to coast. And if that happens, I think the Pac-12 and the Big 12 could actually merge. I think that's a real possibility no matter what. Do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it's possible. Or the other possibility would be the Big 12 merges with the ACC, because Notre Dame is keeping the ACC afloat. If they bolt and join the Big Ten, which means they would use their nuke vote along with 7 other teams to help dissolve the ACC, because right now in their contract, if they were to join a conference, it has to be the ACC up until 2036. So in all these scenarios, not including the ACC, this means Notre Dame voted to dissolve the ACC along with 7 other teams. So keep that in the back of your head. Big 12 merging with the ACC, I think this is something we're talking about. I think this would be an amazing merger, to be honest with you. I think this would be a better merger than the Big 12 Pac-12 for sure, because you got to remember, most of the TV revenue as far as viewership goes comes from the East Coast. So it would be better for the Big 12 to merge with the ACC rather than the Pac-12, because you'd be getting more eyeballs merging with the conference on the eastern side of the United States. That's something that I think really could happen in the future. Might do a video on that later on this month. The next decision, Notre Dame decides to join the SEC. Wow. Well, like I stated earlier, this would mean that Notre Dame helped 7 other teams vote to dissolve the ACC, and I do think the ACC collapses if this happens. And whenever that happens, I think the SEC, the Big 10, and the Big 12 would pick the ACC apart. So any of these scenarios where Notre Dame does not join the ACC and they actually help to vote to dissolve the ACC in order to join another conference, I think the ACC collapses unless they can merge with the Big 12. The next decision for Notre Dame is Notre Dame decides to join the Big 12. Yeah, I think if this happens, I think the Big 12 has massive expansion. I think their TV revenue goes through the roof. Their TV deal would be worth a lot of money. They could pick off as many teams as they wanted from the Pac-12 or the ACC or both. And this would be worst case scenario for the ACC as well, because that means Notre Dame voted to dissolve the ACC along with 7 other teams, so the grant of rights are gone. The Big 12 is not merging with the ACC. In fact, Notre Dame is joining the Big 12. So they're picking off members from the ACC. This is worst case scenario for the ACC. That, and if Notre Dame decided to join the Big Ten. The next decision is Notre Dame actually decides to join the ACC as a full-time football member. This would actually save the ACC. Notre Dame would be the savior of the ACC. Their TV revenue would go through the roof. Their TV deal would be worth a lot of money. they would most certainly be able to renegotiate that TV deal. And if that happens, I think the ACC would be able to pick teams from the Big 12 and perhaps the Pac-12 if they're interested in teams from the Pac-12, which I think if they would be, it would be Washington and Oregon. That's it. Nobody else is worth stretching your conference that far across the country. But teams from the Big 12 definitely grab West Virginia, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and the Texas teams. And boom, the ACC is a mega conference. Notre Dame joining the ACC not only would save the ACC, but it would be a step in the direction of the ACC becoming a mega conference. So the ACC is most certainly wanting Notre Dame to join the ACC as a full-time football member. That is why they put that clause in there where, hey, if Notre Dame, if you decide to join a conference, it has to be the ACC if you join a conference before 2036. But the problem is they gave them that stipulation in their clause, but at the same time, they gave them a nuke vote. So if there's 7 other teams besides Notre Dame that decides, hey, we're done with this, we don't want to be in the ACC anymore, let's get rid of the ACC, they could vote to dissolve the ACC, and there goes the ACC. So you just gave a vote to a team that's not even a full-time football member of your conference that could actually dissolve your conference. The ability to effectively end the ACC. That was not very smart. I understand you probably had to do that for them to accept the clause of if they joined a conference before 2036, it has to be the ACC. I understand that. But I think it would have been better to not put that clause in and not give them a nuke vote. But that's just me. And finally, the last choice, which is the choice that everybody thinks Notre Dame is going to make, and that's Notre Dame just stays independent. And I think if Notre Dame stays independent, the ACC does eventually collapse. Even if Notre Dame is no part of dissolving the ACC, they do not vote to dissolve the ACC. If they don't join the ACC as a full-time football member, eventually the ACC will collapse because they need Notre Dame as a full-time football member in order to survive. So this is also bad news for the ACC. And if that happens, of course, the ACC gets picked apart by the Big 12, the Big 10, and the SEC. And I think it would force the Big 12 and the Pac-12 to compete each other to stay alive. And when I say compete against each other to stay alive, I mean aggressively. None of this acting like you're going to do something, but you don't really do something. No, they would be aggressive about it. The Pac-12 and the Big 12 would try to effectively end the other conference if this happened. So yes, the Notre Dame decision will affect conference realignment in dramatic fashion. And for the ACC, the only hope for them to stay alive as a power conference would be if Notre Dame decided to join the ACC as a full-time football member. Because even if Notre Dame doesn't join another conference and they decide to stay independent, that's still bad news for the ACC. So y'all let me know in the comments section, what do you think Notre Dame eventually decides to do? Do you think they actually decide to remain independent forever? Or do you think they actually join a conference in the future? And if they do join a conference, do you think it's the ACC? Or do you think they're one of the 8 teams that votes to dissolve the ACC and they joins another conference? And therefore, the future of the ACC as a conference is not looking good. That's all I got for this show. Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you on my next show.